I have to confess to you something. I am hopelessly in love with the literature of the theater. And the great thing about it is that it has actually been my constant companion over a 30-year period. And I've been with the same company all this time. I guess I'm one of those people that doesn't really like to change in a way, but I love change. And so I have been able to take this wonderful, wonderful thing, the theater, and it has changed my life so many times and changed the direction of what I do and what I think and what my challenges are. And I am incredibly grateful to the theater and to plays and playwrights. Writing plays is very difficult. David Mamet said something very interesting once. He said, when you come into the theater, you have to be willing to say that you're coming in to undergo a communion. If you're not willing to do that, what you get is entertainment, not art, and poor entertainment at that. And that's been something that I've thought a lot about. I started off as an actor. I was actually a professional actor, a child actor, and when I got into my 20s, I kind of realized that I loved the theater, but this wasn't for me. I actually sort of went off to graduate school and studied history and thought I was going to become a historian. And then I got pulled back into the theater by a chance remark somebody made to me at a party talking about the theater and wouldn't it be interesting to try to make theater in an unusual environment, perhaps in prisons or jails? So I found myself 6 months pregnant, working at the county jail with a couple of colleagues, doing theater games and improvisation and working with inmates to create plays. And what I found was that it was so interesting and involving, and actually at that time more interesting than anything that I was seeing in the theater. I also remember how gallant they were all male inmates, the male and reverential they were, because I was 6 months pregnant. It made a huge impression on me, actually. And that kind of morphed into an informal and then a formal organization, which I somehow found myself running. We were a group of theater artists. Some of us were set designers, costume designers, production designers. There was a writer. There were a couple of actors. We called ourselves artists in prison. And we started working in prisons. We worked at the state level at the California Institution for Women and then the California Institution for Men. And we then started in at the federal level at Terminal Island. And I always remember the awful appropriateness of that word, Terminal Island, for a prison. And we used the sort of theater games, improvisation technique to create original plays with the inmates. And on those long drives, we used to kind of plan and scheme and think, like, what's our next project? What's the next thing we're going to do? And I remember once we were on this drive, and we had an actress with us that we'd hired. Her name was Milcha Sanchez Scott. And she started telling us about her experiences working with an employment agency that hired women who were Latinas as housekeepers. They were mostly illegal, and this was an employment agency that placed them. And then she sort of shyly revealed that she'd written an outline of a play. And I remember there were about 6 of us in the car, one set designer, one director, one actor, one writer, and simultaneously we all screamed, "Where is it? We've got to see this." And that's how Milcha became a playwright. And we became a producer of a play called Latina, which ran in Los Angeles. It was our first venture in the sort of professional theater in Los Angeles. And being a producer is kind of like being a doctor, when you got a play running, like being a doctor on call all the time. And I remember once when Latina was running, about 2 months into the run, about 7 o'clock at night, I got a call from the stage manager, and she said, X is not here. She's been arrested. She's in county jail for growing marijuana on her balcony. And I thought, oh, okay, okay. And then I said, okay, I'm going to find a bail bondsman. I'm going to go down to county jail. I'm going to get her out. You go buy some wine. Don't spend too much money, and some cheese, and let's try to buy 45 minutes with our audience and keep them happy. So I raced down to the county jail. I did get her bailed out, and I brought her back. She was pretty hysterical, and I kind of tried to keep her calm with original quotes like, the show must go on. Anyway, we threw her costume on, and the show went on. And then we finished out a successful run. And other things happened along the way. I remember we then started to get other ideas about things we could do in the community, and we started doing plays in the community. And so the name Artists in Prison didn't really feel right anymore, and we thought, well, what's a great name that we can sort of not lose Artists in Prison? So we came up with Artists in Prison and Other Places. Now that's a brand for you. But we did actually do some pretty interesting stuff. I remember we worked with a group of Japanese men, and we created a play with them. We did a play with older and younger women, ages 20 to 80, and we did a play called Not as a Sleepwalker. And it actually came out of a remark. One of the 80-year-olds said to one of the 20-year-olds, whatever you do, don't go through life as a sleepwalker. So we began doing that, and it was a very interesting way of exploring theater and making theater with ordinary people in the community. I remember we made a film about our experience putting together a play at Terminal Island called Jump Street. And at that point, we had somehow persuaded the prison authorities that it would be a great idea to furlough people, because TI was a minimum security institution. It was also co-ed, which is a whole other interesting story. But we convinced them that they should furlough the inmates. They could come back to the prison every night, but they would actually perform for the community at large. We did it at the John Anson Ford Theater, which is right across from the Hollywood Bowl. So every night, the idea was the inmates would go out, they would perform, and just like Cinderella returning from the ball, they'd come home. About 2 days before this huge effort, which took us 4 or 5 months to put together, this original show with inmates, the prison was put into lockdown. Now, none of our guys and women were involved in the actual incident that provoked the lockdown. Lockdown means everybody goes back to their cell and nobody moves and nothing happens. Well, you know, when you work in the theater, the magic of the theater is that everything is possible. That's the magic. In prison, nothing is possible. And that's the challenge. It's also what makes working in that environment wonderful and incredibly rewarding. So here we were with all this effort, and everybody's locked down. There are no exceptions. And I thought to myself, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I think my mind started clicking, and I thought, prison, federal, Congress, Senator Tunney. How am I going to get to Senator Tunney? He was a liberal Democrat. He was our senator. Somehow I got to Tunney. He made a phone call, and the prison authorities decided to let those inmates perform, and they were allowed to leave the lockdown, and we performed. After that period of time, we began to think about really working in the professional theater with playwrights. And the next phase of LA Theater, of what became LA Theater Works, was working in the professional theater, developing plays with playwrights, a lot of foreign playwrights and a lot of new American playwrights. And so we changed our name from Artists in Prison and Other Places to LA Theater Works. And we started working with plays and playwrights, and I heard about this very interesting fellow named Stephen Berkoff. And he was quite an interesting avant-garde artist in England, and I got in touch with him and read one of his plays. I thought he was fantastic, and I brought him to the United States, and that began a very long association with probably one of the most interesting and original people working in the theater during that time in the early 80s. And I remember we had a huge hit with one of his plays called Greek, and we won all kinds of awards in Los Angeles. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to take Stephen Berkoff to New York. And so we raised the money, and we tried to bring it to New York. We produced the play in New York, and of course we got killed by the critics. I'll never forget it. It was a crushing defeat, and we kind of came home and felt absolutely terrible about the whole experience. But it was one of those things that, on reflection, I think it was my first, what I would consider my first big failure. And I probably learned more from that failure and how you handle failure and risk than probably anything else that I've ever done. And somebody came to me and said there are a group of actors in Los Angeles who love the theater. They're famous because of film and television. They're here, but they really don't want to travel around the country to work in regional theaters to satisfy their urge to do theater. And it didn't interest me much because my emphasis at that point was on plays, new writing, interesting work. And the idea of celebrity didn't interest me at all. But somehow, like a lot of good things that have happened, I did allow myself ultimately to be persuaded. And we assembled a group of 34 superb actors. I mean, people like John Lithgow and Ed Asner and Marcia Mason, Julie Harris, Helen Hunt, Hector Elizondo, Stacy Keach, Richard Dreyfuss. It was quite a group. And we had this dream that we were going to form a theater company in Los Angeles unlike any other, that brought in world-class directors to direct this illustrious group of 34 people and create a new equity theater in Los Angeles. Again, it was in some ways, it was a failure. We never were able to raise the money that we needed for a variety of reasons. And one day, but the group persisted, and we did lots of things. We did workshop productions and had a good time with each other. And one day, Richard Dreyfuss said, you know, I've always wanted to work in the, on radio. And how about doing a play on the radio? And I thought to myself, there's an interesting idea. I said, well, you know, I do know this woman who runs a public radio station. Her name's Ruth Seymour. It's called KCRW. So I went to Ruth, and she thought it was a terrific idea. So we decided we would record Babbitt. And Ruth said she'd air it. And we spent about a year and a half. We had no idea what we were doing. We brought it into the studio. We put it up on a computer. At that time in the mid-'80s, people weren't really using computer, but we found a kind of a theater person who loved computers, who put all 90 characters in the book up on a computer. And we actually, over a period of a year, recorded the play just the way you do a film in the studio. It took us about 6 months to have a wonderful editor edit it. Ruth premiered it as an all-day marathon on Thanksgiving Day. And it was a 12-and-a-half-hour recording. And it just exploded. It took off. NPR picked it up and aired it all over the country. And then the BBC got in touch with us. They heard about us and said, we're going to come over to America. We'll pay for everything. We want to do 2 plays with you, The Crucible and Are You Now or Have You Ever Been? And we said yes. And here we are, 400 plays later, and LA Theater Works was transformed into a recording company. We have recorded 400 plays, but today we have, we're in about 100 markets all over the United States with our radio show. Once we started working on the radio, we realized we had all of this sensational content, and we thought, well, what about publishing this, being audio publishers? So then we had to learn the audio publishing business. We decided to go back. We got all the rights. It was not easy, but we got rights to actually sell. At that time, it was cassettes. And we started selling cassettes to libraries and to people all over the country and all over the world. And so we began to learn the audio publishing business in addition to learning the radio business, in addition to, trying to understand something about the play business. And as we began to expand and learn about all of these businesses, it occurred to me that I was such a lucky person because I stayed with the same company for my whole career, but I had such an incredible opportunity to get into all kinds of things that I had absolutely no knowledge about, that I was kind of I had to go from being an amateur to becoming a bit of a professional in each of these things. And as we began to accumulate new staff members with different kinds of expertise, it became more and more interesting. And then we started expanding from radio to audio publishing. One of the things we tried to figure out is how best to get ourselves out there, first all over the United States. And so we started touring our show just the way that Garrison Keillor or Ira Glass tours This American Life. And so we started touring around the United States. And one of the things that we did was to take a show from our catalog and tour it around the United States. And so one of the things that we have done is to take our show, 1 show a year, and play maybe 40 to 50 venues around the United States. A couple of years ago, I got the idea that we would do some international touring. And so through a series of crazy circumstances, we ended up deciding that we would go to China and tour a play in China. And we chose a play that I guess people thought we were a bit crazy to take, but it seemed to me if we were going to do it, it had to be worth doing. And so we took a play, believe it or not, about freedom of the press to China. It's called Top Secret, The Battle for the Pentagon Papers, and it is about the Washington Post decision to publish the Pentagon Papers after the New York Times had published them for 3 days in 1971 and been enjoined by the government. It's a great play because it's an easy-to-understand story. It's one of the great stand-up and cheer plays about one of the great moments in American journalism. It has heroes, it has villains. It shows American democracy and the court system, warts and all. And so we thought this would be a great play to take to China. It was a huge risk, and we brought the play in 2011. We played 3 cities. We were almost shut down, but we made it through. And then we came back this year in 2013, and this time we were invited to play the National Theater and 6 other cities in China. We played to thousands and thousands of people. We were sold out everywhere we went. And the thing that was so thrilling about it, let me just take a look here. Yeah, here we go. That's Top Secret. That's our cast. And those are some of the comments. And one of the great and thrilling things about it is the entire audience, I would say, everywhere we went, were 35 and under. All young people, all fascinated with this topic. And they came in droves. I'll never forget standing in the lobby of the theater the first time we got there after all the problems we had trying to get the show there. And I thought, what if nobody comes? And I'm sitting in the lobby, and the doors open, and hundreds of young Chinese streamed into the theater. And I thought, this is worth it. This is worth everything. Thank you.